Today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Sam Horn. Now, if you're not familiar with Sam Horn, this is one you should Google. She is amazing. She is the queen of communication, of finding your voice, of using words that actually make an impact on your life. She is no stranger to risk, to ups and downs of life, and she will be sharing some of these stories with us today. Professionally, she is the founder and CEO of the Intrigue Agency. She has done 3 TEDx talks. She has 10 books and more on the way. She is a New York Times bestseller. She's presented on stage to the likes of Intel, Oracle, NASA. She's endorsed by Tony Robbins. I mean, this woman is amazing. She is a wealth of wisdom. She puts a perspective on life that I think all of us should embrace and run with. She says it's never too late to put yourself into your own story. How beautiful is that? So here I am with the pleasure of introducing Sam Horn. Welcome, Sam Horn.
Why, thank you, Tricia. I've been looking forward to our time together.
Oh, me too. You're fresh in from Hawaii. You've been on vacation, enjoying the most beautiful sights. I've been loving your posts.
Thank you. As you know, I ran the Maui Writers Conference for 17 years. My sons were born and raised there. So to go back to the beaches where they grew up and watch them play with their kids, where they played as kids, satisfying full circle moment.
There's so much gratitude in that. Just so much, which I'm sure we'll unpack. But those little moments are so precious.
Meister Eckhart said, if the only prayer you ever said was thank you, that would be enough. And I was saying thank you every single day I was there.
I love that. I love that so much. So I have been really looking forward to this interview for many different reasons. But one is, and the little beautiful amount of time I've been able to spend with you, it's very apparent that you have an amazing gift of communication and storytelling, not only to share your voice, but to help others share your voice. And it has plagued me with a question that I would love to ask you, because I want to know what it was like for 5-year-old Sam. Were you like, what was kindergarten Sam? Did you always have this gift of communication, or was this something that you discovered later in your life?
Boy, what a great question. And there's kind of 2 answers to it. 5-year-old Sam was riding horses, if you can believe it. We were so fortunate. We lived in a small town in Southern California, and our parents gave us a draft horse, Elko, when I was 5 years old. And he was so safe that if you started losing your balance, he would stop until you could regain your balance. And I ended up, my sister and I, we would be gone riding on our horses all day when we were like 7, 8 years old, before cell phones. And our parents didn't worry. Instead, they trusted we would be resourceful, get bucked off, figure it out, bridle breaks, figure it out. And that has played a huge role in becoming an entrepreneur and seeing the world as an adventurous place, not a dangerous place, and being able to communicate what we want, need, instead of waiting to be rescued.
Do you think that's interesting? Because do you think that the newer entrepreneurs, the younger entrepreneurs, the 20-year-old entrepreneurs are actually at a disadvantage then? Because I grew up very similar to you, where I just had to figure it out. There was nobody, hovering over me. If I didn't come home, I was like, so I do wonder, with you working with so many entrepreneurs, do you see a drastic change in the way that they problem solve in these newer generations growing up on screen from generations such as ours?
Ooh, how much time do we have?
We have as long as I have, as much time as you want, Sam. It is yours.
Especially you talked about entrepreneurs. Let's talk about communication and young people who grew up as digital natives. I'm often hired by companies who bring me in because their younger employees don't know how to communicate. If a customer complains, They just ghost them because they didn't sit around a dining room table, and learn to argue or have differences of opinion or to be open to someone's point of view, etc. And online, if you don't like someone, you just ghost them, right? Or little emojis, that's it. So definitely when it comes to communication, I believe that digital natives grew up without that ability to think on their feet and suss through conflicts and deal with some difficult emotions and actually express them instead of suppress them.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think in a world of this, in this social media, we have all these expectations of who we're supposed to be, and we're not necessarily honing in on who we are or who we innately were. And that's why I was asking about you as a kid, because I thought, not everyone recognizes the beautiful gifts that they are given. They're given it, and you see it when they're little, and then all of a sudden the world starts telling them who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do, and then they lose that connection to that gift. I was
You know,
reading some of your story about just abandoning, a lot of what you had done for years, the status quo, working for, I think, multiple decades, 7 days a week, young children, and just abandoning it and taking a risk. And I have to believe that part of that reason you took that risk is because you fell off that horse and you had to figure it out. So, can
it,
we talk a little bit about where you were and how you took that risk that led you to really hone in on this gift and make it such an amazing career?
well, thank you. And, this is about what are we modeling, right?
Yeah.
And without realizing it, some of us are modeling martyrdom. Some of us are modeling that we work 7 days a week. And that's the responsible thing to do if we're raising a family, right? Or if we're trying to pay the bills. And we think we're doing the right thing, the responsible thing. Maybe not. So I'd actually just finished a very intense consult, and I needed to return my rental car, fly back to DC, fly back to San Francisco a couple, that routine, right?
Yeah.
And my son Andrew called and he sensed something in my voice and he said, "What's up, Mom?" And I said, "Andrew, I'm so exhausted. I don't know how I'm going to get on that plane." And thank heaven for him and his pattern interruption because he said, "There's something about you I don't understand. You have your own business. You can do anything you want, and you're not taking advantage of it," out of the mouths of 20 somethings. And so that motivated me to give away 90% of what I owned and take my business on a road instead of thinking it was something I would do someday, right?
Well, we all wait till someday, right? We're going to wait till after Christmas, till times slow down, right? Like they're going to slow down, right? We always have those obstacles coming at us. So you had said something like you went on the road to be on the water for a year. So what did that mean?
I thought, what do I want to do? Well, I've always loved water. I've lived by the ocean, used to do the Waikiki rough water swim and so forth. And so I wanted like a moonshot, when John F. Kennedy said, in 10 years, we're going to have a man on the moon. That was challenging. It was achievable. It was measurable, and it galvanized our country into action. So I didn't want to just take time off. That's much too vague, right? There's no ikigai in that. There's no something specific on our calendar we're looking forward to, we're working towards. So I thought, I know, I'm going to go on this year by the water. And I ended up sailing the Chesapeake Bay and frolicking with dolphins and swimming in Walden Pond. And I interviewed people along the way. And I asked, "Are you happy? And if so, why? And if not, why not?" And do we have time for me to tell you one of the most poignant stories I heard?
I have all the time in the world for you. You tell it.
Tricia, so many people would talk about like, well, I want to do what you're doing someday, right? But first I got to get the kids through school, and first I've got a lot of people at work depending on me, and I got a mortgage, and they were assuming that what they wanted to do would be waiting for them when they were ready for it. And many people felt kind of noble because once again, they really thought they were doing the right thing. But Paulo Coelho said, one day we're going to wake up and there won't be any time left to do the things we've always wanted to do. And I know that waiting is a regret waiting to happen. So this book was based on all those stories, and in particular story of one man. He was in his 30s. He was married. He and his wife both worked full time. They had two kids, one with special needs, and he was the sole support of both of his parents who both had dementia. And I said, "So what's your dream?" And he just looked at me and he said, "I don't dream anymore. It's too painful." Oof. By the way, we did come up with a solution for him. You want to know what happened?
Absolutely.
It's like he said, "Sam, dream, I go from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep 7 days a week." And I said, "Okay, I understand you don't have any spare time. What if you could swap time? What if one night a week you pick up the kids, you fix dinner, you do the homework or help them with their homework, you get them to bed, and your wife is free one night a week to do what she wants, whether it's yoga, whether it's go to the library, whether it's get caught up on sleep, whatever." And then she swaps. One night, it's your night. She takes care of the kids. You can, play pickleball if you want. And he said, "Do you know that one night a week to be free to do something that lights us up? It put the romance back in our relationship because we were burnt out. The resentments had started to build up, and like we were getting impatient with each other and short. And so sometimes we can't find time. We can swap time. And as Byron Katie said, my happiness is on me. So you're off the hook."
So true. I think that's a great idea of swapping because it also shows the impact of community. I and how much we have to lean on each other to really thrive and ask for what we want and be vulnerable and ask for when we're going to have help. I'm a powerful woman. I have been that way from the time I was little. I've an only child, had to live my life way too young in many different ways. But I'm not very good at asking for help often. And that's something I've had to learn as I get older. And there's so much to swapping with someone or relying on those people and trusting them to understand that you need that and you need that time. I think that's beautiful in a world where we're supposedly so connected, but we have no community anymore. Right? I think it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
the concept of actually taking action on it, as you may not wake up tomorrow. Today's a gift. I wake up every day and I'm like, wow, I am grateful to be alive. And if I catch myself saying, oh, blah, 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 playing the blame game, I stop because I'm fortunate enough to be alive. My parents aren't alive. My grandparents aren't alive. They're all gone and they died young and they were doing exactly what you were saying. Oh, when I retire, I will travel. When this happens, I will do this. And they never got the opportunity. And I think there's so much power in that. And it's unfortunate that we have to have some of those moments of low to open up these beautiful opportunities. Can you think of a moment? You probably had many, I imagine, in your career, in your life, where you were at that point where you had a choice to be a victim and just call it off, or you had a choice to really make a change and become who you've become, write that book, help others write that book, and live the life that you want. Was there any pivotal moment for you, or was it just a compound throughout your life?
Well, wonderful question. And I will be specific because one of the things you told me is that you wanted this to be a really honest and raw conversation, that people don't need little pat theories, that if for some reason someone is struggling or going through a hard time, it really can be a pebble in the pond of our future
Yeah.
to hear that someone else has been in a dark time and has survived it. So I'll give a very specific answer to your question is that years ago, I ended up in a relationship with a very toxic individual. Now, I had written the book Tung Fu, which is Gandhi, be the change you wish to see. And I believe with 90% of people, if you're kind and compassionate, they will respond in kind. This was the part of the 10% of individuals who didn't want to cooperate, wanted to control, who didn't want a win-win, who wanted to win, and who essentially, it was my way or the highway, very difficult situation. And all my tongue fu techniques didn't work because people don't respond. The 10%ers don't respond to kindness. They see it as a weakness. And so a good friend, John Tullius, who founded the Maui Writers Conference, gave me a quote from William Blake. And William Blake said, "We are all born innocent. And at some point we encounter evil. And at that point, we either become defined and defeated by that individual or that incident, or we become, are you ready for two of the most beautiful words in the English language?
Absolutely.
Informed innocence, INNOCENTS. When we are an informed innocent, it's not that we do not know evil exists. We just choose not to let it define or defeat us. And I ended up writing a book called Take the Bully by the Horns. And I didn't even, quote unquote, have to research it, so to speak, because I wrote it from experience. And so what you're saying right there is that a quote in the book that's actually quite controversial, yet it's very thought-provoking, is there are no victims without volunteers.
I agree.
Go ahead. And why? Why?
Well, I do believe, I think our backgrounds kind of dictate how we interpret the world, right? And my background comes from a lot of loss. And hitting dark places from that and wondering if I'm going to go on, right? And there was a moment where I had to make a choice to live. And I think in those moments, when someone has those moments, it's easy for me to say to somebody else, you need to make that choice. But you do. I think we do. We make a choice how we impact our world every single day. And I think a lot of this is learned. Perhaps this person that was toxic in your life had learned those behaviors from their experience. They didn't know any different. And unfortunately, they may never be different, But what you learned from it was how to respond to that. And then you pay that forward to your children, to the people you communicate with, to the energy that you put out there. And I think that is now changing the world for the future, changing the world for our children. So I actually believe you do make a choice. I think some people maybe aren't open to change because it's scary. Their nervous systems keep them in a fight or flight. They're not willing to let go. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I think one of the most important epiphanies in my life is I interviewed a lot of people for that book, whether it was at work, it was a bully boss, whether it was a spouse or significant other or a parent or a sibling or who knows. And when I asked about the impact of that really challenging situation that rocked them to the core, where it was verbal abuse or it was mistreatment, we're not talking about someone having a bad day here. We're talking about someone who's out to take you down. And a marvelous epiphany arose from that unfair, undeserved things will happen to us. And we're at a crossroads. We either use it as an excuse or we use it as incentive, right? We either use it as an excuse. Well, I can't stay in a relationship because my parents had such an ugly divorce. Well, I can't get it, because I don't have, no. Incentive, because you used it as incentive, didn't you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think, but there was a moment, there's always a moment where you go through ups and downs and you have to really hold into your heart. And I do believe that if you lead from your heart and you lead with good intention and you really take the time to be vulnerable, you can find the good in every single situation. I just think that, being someone who specializes in adrenals, I see that those fight or flight responses are just taking over the world. And they're taking it over in media, in social media, in expectations. Growing up as a model, I was no stranger to that, to people putting expectations on me and telling me who I was supposed to be, what clothes was I supposed to wear, how am I supposed to show up, be quiet, look cute, don't use your voice, right? Just, I don't want to hear your opinion, stand in front of the camera. And when I was younger, I suppose there weren't a ton of people experiencing that, but now everyone's experiencing that. Everybody in the world is experiencing someone trying to shut them down, somebody deciding that their opinion is going to have an impact on us. And I think we're needing to develop a whole new skill set. And it probably goes back to you and the horse, right? The skill set that we were raised with that some of our children are not being raised with in the same way. It does give me future concern about the health of our country, right? And I'm curious if the entrepreneurs and the people that you interviewed in all that time, if you found that most of them had the same type of epiphany, the same type of failure, the same type of choice. And that's what in turn has made them so successful and be so impactful on the world. Because everyone thinks it's easy. You're just lucky, right? You're not lucky. You made it happen. You made it happen through mindset and choice and passion and drive and gifts that all of us are given. So what makes you, Sam Horn, and all of these entrepreneurs and me different? Is it that we made a different choice?
Yeah. Tricia, it is that, as you said, if we accept that at some point something will happen that's unfair, someone will get the job that we deserved. We won't get the promotion that we were promised, is that someone will walk out of a relationship out of the blue, that things will go wrong. And as Elvis said, when things go wrong, don't go with them. And Tricia, sometimes this is dismissed as being a Pollyanna. Well,
Right.
as Esther Hicks said, Pollyanna had a very good life. So you know what? Why not choose to be proactive? Not only does it create a better quality of life for us, and we're talking about on a single basis, we're back to modeling. What are we modeling for our children? What are we modeling for our employees? We can moan and groan, or we can ask ourselves what we're going to do about it. And once again, at a crossroad, moan and groan, so, or what are we going to do about it? Let's be proactive rather than reactive. I think you and I have just discovered on a daily basis it's better for us and it's better for every single person around us.
Oh, I am no fun when I'm stressed out. My family is like, oh my God, would you leave and go somewhere? I can't imagine anything productive coming out of waking up and just constantly being in a bad mood. The glass is half empty, blah, blah, blah. There's so much opportunity. There's so much beauty. Maybe that's why I've always been drawn to animals, because they wake up and they see the beauty every day for the most part. I don't know. And I'm drawn to people such as you that see the beauty in life, because we only, knowingly get one life. So we get to choose how we're going to live it and choose how we spend our time. And you had 2 young children, right? And single with 2 young children, writing books and doing all these things. So you had that work-life balance that a lot of people really struggle with. I've struggled with it. How do you pursue success, but then also model the right behavior for your children? Because if you're not present, what's the point, right? So do you have any tips or beautiful stories surrounding how you were able to do that?
Well, I love this question. So yes to a story and yes to a tip, right? As Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So story and tip, right?
Yeah.
So as you know, I've had the privilege of being a professional speaker for 30 years now. And when I lived in Maui raising my sons, I flew across an ocean and a continent to go to the National Speakers Association convention in Florida. And the first day there, I ran into Maggie Bedrosian, who ran NSADC. Hadn't seen her in years. Oh, Sam, how are you doing? I started telling her. She asked such a good question. She said, Sam, tell me in one word how you're doing. Great question, huh? And I dug down deep and I said, Maggie, I'm conflicted. Her eyes flew up and she said, conflicted? I said, yesterday at this time, I was on the beach with my sons. They were slapping their boards on those waves and riding them all the way until they scraped their bellies on the beach. And there wasn't anywhere I'd rather be. I said, now I'm surrounded by my peers. My mind is just teeming with all these projects and ideas. I constantly feel like I'm being torn between 2 worlds. Thank heaven for Maggie Bedrosian. She said, Sam, the words you use to describe yourself define yourself. You better come up with a different word than conflicted, or that's what you're going to be. Well, I got the assignment. So I thought about it and I woke up at 3 a.m. and I had absolute clarity. And I looked for the next day. There she was. I ran up. I said, Maggie, Maggie, I figured it out. I'm not conflicted. I'm blessed. I'm not torn between two worlds. I have the best of both worlds. So, see, first, as you say, it doesn't serve to be stressed. It's to remember that if we have work we love, meaningful job, and we're fortunate to have a partner or children or loved ones, we're not torn between two worlds. We have the best of both worlds. And now the tip is that I think we can integrate our loved ones into our work. I heard one time someone say that one of the best things we can do for our kids is to let them overhear us bragging about them to someone else. So I would come home from a conference and I would say, "Oh, Tom, I shared your why me story. Oh, Andrew, I shared your what." When I would get a box of new books, we had a little ritual. We would open the box and I would say, "Tom, turn to page 57. Andrew, turn to page 131." And there were their stories. So they knew that even if I was on the road speaking somewhere, I was sharing their story and I would tell them about it and the reaction from people. So they were a part of my work. They were not apart from my work.
Words are, I don't have to tell you this. I mean, but words are so powerful. The words we use, so powerful. And simply just changing the words, I agree, can completely change the trajectory of your life.
And our career and our relationships and words matter. In fact, Seth Godin said in his endorsement of one of my books, words matter, every single one of them. And this book will transform the way you use them. And another quick story.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
had an opportunity to give a Tung Fu workshop for Kaiser Permanente. And then I went back 3 years later as a patient. And when I walked in, the receptionist recognized me and she looked around. There wasn't anyone in the lobby at that point, and she beckoned me over and pointed to the words to lose, words to use reminder card that was still taped to her desk. And she said, Sam, I'm the first point of contact here. So they hired me because I'm pretty nice. She said, and I never used to understand why people were so rude to me when I was so nice to them. And then I took your Tung Fu workshop and I learned about all those words to lose. But, well, I'd like to help you. But, sorry that happened. But you should have called earlier if you wanted to, you have to fill out this paperwork first. It's like, I can't because, well, no, you can't have an appointment this afternoon because, and she said, no wonder people were so angry with me. I was just shutting them down constantly with these words. And you gave us these words to use, and instead of but. So I'd like to help you. And let me finish with this person first. And you're next. Instead of you should have called, it's next time, please call at least 3 days in advance so we can. And she says, now, Sam, these words to use put us on the same side instead of side against side.
It's so powerful. And even all of your books address words, but it's just, how old were you when you wrote your first book, by the way?
Let me do the math. 33. 33.
And was that after you left like the corporate or just 7 days a week world, or was that before?
Let's see. I was a young mom with young kids. And so I wrote at night, Tricia, almost entirely after 9, 10 o'clock at night when I put my sons down. Here's the good news, though. Because there were no interruptions, I had that exquisite immersion into that state of flow. And I would come to like at 2 or 3 in the morning and I would look at what I had written. And I knew I had just written it. However, it was better than I knew how. In fact, when I turned my What's Holding You Back book into my editor, Jen Enderlin at St. Martin's Press. She said, Sam, it flows like a symphony. I wouldn't change a word. And that's because instead of trying to write when the kids were running around and so forth, no, I was present to them. Once they went to bed, I was present to my books and writing.
Yeah, I used to travel when I wrote my book. I think Shay was about 18 months old, 2 years old, and my older about 4 or 5. And I
Wow.
used to go every Friday morning to the coffee shop in the same place, and I would write. And then I would take weekends in San Diego by myself. And I would accomplish 4 chapters in the weekends of San Diego because I had literally no distraction. But then I could come home and take a week and be present with my kids. And I do think that idea of flow is very important because we do try to do a lot of things. I'm going to try to write a book. I'm going to try to advance my career, when we just sometimes need to just let it go and trust. Did you always know that you were going to be an author? Is that what you set out to be?
I would love to answer that. And can we turn the conversation back to you? Because I'd love to know what other lesson about writing really helped you write a book that's out there making a difference for so many people. What's something you'd like to share with our community?
I think the first thing I learned is that you have to take a risk, because I actually had a very unique situation that I've never really heard from anyone else, that I had a publisher actually reaching out to me. They had seen me on a YouTube. They offered me an advance. They wanted to write a book. And I said, I don't write. I'm not an author. I'm a doctor. I don't know what you're talking about. I couldn't even fathom writing a book. And my mom at the time was my office manager. And she said, this lady just keeps calling. I think you need to have a meeting with her. So I had a meeting and I said to her, I said, look, I love what I do and I'm passionate, but I have never written a book before. My strength was not English. Like, I don't know that I can do this. And I had a lot of self-doubt in my ability to do it. And I mean, love her persistence, because she said, we're going to give you advance. I'm going to help you edit it. I just want you to speak as you. I don't want you to worry about the grammar. I don't want you to worry about the structure. I just want you to write. I want you to write your knowledge. And I did. I took a leap. I took a leap of faith in myself when I didn't feel that I could do it at the time. And from the writing, I think I realized how much just letting go and just going with the process and not worrying so much about how it's going to come across was my biggest lesson. And out of it, the book is done. It goes to the publisher. It's out of my hands, right? Rare. That's rare. They're promoting it, whatever. It sells 60,000 copies within the first 2 years. And it's weird because I still, if you ask me, hey, Tricia, are you an author? I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, I guess I am. It wasn't something that I set out to do. It wasn't something that I knew I could do. I also didn't think I could do natural childbirth. So, I mean, I've learned in my life that if you take risks, you trust that you may not always know where that's going, but just trust in the process, your voice, what other people may see in you, because we're always our biggest critic. So that was my biggest lesson, is that I can be an author. I can write whatever I want. And if I find another book in me, by all means, man, it's coming out, whether I think I can do it or not. But that was my biggest lesson, to trust and let go.
And who is the publisher of that book, and what is the name, so people can go out and get it?
Oh, sure. Well, it was originally published by Rodale Publishing, who has since been purchased by Hearst. At that time, they let go of the direct marketing division. So it's actually back in my possession. So now it's self-published. Total Health Turnaround. You can find it on Amazon. But yeah, it's interesting because as the author, and you probably actually get some of the feedback more from being out there and speaking so much, but I don't know who reads my book. I did get letters for the longest time of people that would write in and say, wow, you really changed my life. I loved this book. Stress is such a big deal. But it's funny. It's like something put out there, and I don't always get that impact that it gives other people. I know that you work with so many people and teach them how to find their voice. Did you struggle with finding your voice originally?
Nope. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because it goes back to something you said, Tricia, is that People say I'm not a writer. Well, we're a thinker. And if we're a thinker and if we're an observer, we're a writer, especially, if we use this, Robert Frost said, no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader. So if we're a walker and if we're observing, if we're Mary Olivering our life, she said, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. So if we dare to be raw and real, if we dare to share what we've learned along the way, the hard way, so other people don't have to, etc., then writing, in fact, do we have time for a little story about how good? The very first year of the Maui Writers Conference, I was the MC as well, so I would walk the beach to get my intro straight. And here was this woman sitting on the beach crying. And I went over, I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I'm not okay." She said, "I don't belong here." I said, "You don't belong here?" She said, "Who am I to write a book?" She said, "It's like you're putting yourself up on a pedestal. I'm not perfect. It feels kind of arrogant to write a book." And I said, "What do you want to write about?" Well, this was Jana Wolf, and she and her husband had adopted a child, and he was very challenging. She said, "I went to the bookstore, I went to the library to try and find books that help. There were all these books about what a blessing it was to be an adoptive mom. They made me feel worse." She said, "I wanted to write the book I couldn't find." I said, "Well, like, what's an example of what you want to write about?" And she said, "I want to talk about the time Ari was 3 and I fixed spaghetti for dinner. And he reaches across the table and he grabs a handful of spaghetti and he throws it in my face. And my first thought was, my son would never have done that." And I said, "Jana, the question to ask is not, am I perfect? Do I have an MFA?" No, the question is, would someone reading my book benefit? I said, if someone reading your book will benefit, not only do you have the right to write, you have a responsibility to write. And if you go online, there's Jana Wolf's book, Secret Thoughts of an Adoptive Mother, still selling years later. She says, "Sam, not a week goes by where I don't get an email from someone saying, I thought I was the only one."
Yeah, we're so afraid to talk vulnerably about it. It's like we're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be perfect moms. We're supposed to be perfect at handling those problems. I have a challenging child. One of them is like the easiest kid in the world. And I was like, "Ooh." And then, of course, I'm sure it was prepping me for number two. Um, thank goodness. But yeah, we do kind of walk through the world not thinking we're good enough when really just saying what we want to say. Not everyone's going to like it. Not everyone's going to agree. And I think that's where I would like to model for our younger generations to not worry so much about what people are going to think of it. Do it because it's innate to you, because we do live our lives worrying about what so-and-so is going to say, or what am I going to look like on this? And imagine the freedom and the weight lifted and the stress gone if you just let go of that idea that you have to please anyone but you.
Let's get off the comparison seesaw, Tricia. It's if we feel our life is a series of ups and downs, perhaps we're depending on other people for our opinions of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you're thinking, well, people may agree with that in theory, how do we do it in practice? This is in my What's Holding You Back book, which is coming out on Audible next week. And it is comparison is the root of all unhappiness and the ruin of our self-esteem. And if we compare ourselves to others, we're either up or down. We either feel we're better than them, that's superiority, we don't want to feel that, or we feel they're better than us, and that's inferiority, and we don't want to feel that. So instead, we can aspire or admire. We can either admire, good for them for being fit, good for them for being able to run a 10K, good for them for starting their own business, for having a New York Times bestseller, whatever. Other people's strengths don't need to diminish our value. We can say good for them and genuinely respect them and be glad for them, or we can aspire. We can say, how can I? I'll always remember after a workshop, a woman said, Sam, I used that the week after your program. She said, I've become kind of a desk potato, not just a couch potato, a desk potato, and decided to get in shape. She said, I walked in, I looked at all those, those people leaping around in their leotards. She said, I wanted to go home and inhale a pint of Haagen-Dazs. She said, and then I remembered, you know, what good would it do me to go home and inhale? I was comparing, right? And it was causing me to quit. Instead, I admired, good for them for being in good shape. How can I? Well, how can I get in shape? Not by going home and inhaling some Haagen-Dazs, right? So admiring and inspiring really gets us off the comparison seesaw.
And it models it for our children. I always think of, if my son comes home and says, I've had a bad day, there was a bully at school, I don't feel worth it, I don't think I can go out for the football team, whatever it may be, what words of advice would I give him? Right? I would, tell him he absolutely can. And that, try to reaffirm his worth and tell him, to go for his dreams or whatever he wants, and that I love him and I'm going to support him no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't do that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we're our best friend. I mean, nobody knows me better than me, and yet we don't give ourselves that grace. We compare to other people and we give up, and we don't always have that cheerleader, or we wait for external validation to give us that cheerleader, when in true reality, it's right here. We could cheer ourselves on and support ourselves to try something new, to take risks, and to not put so much judgment on that.
Brene Brown says, talk to yourself as you would to a good friend. And as you say, no, we talk to ourselves like we're our own worst critic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. It is, I think this is one of the biggest shifts in the Tung Fu and Talking on Eggshells book, is that when something goes wrong or we make a mistake, we can be a critic or we can be a coach. A critic, we tell ourselves what we should have done. I can't believe you did that. How many times? And go down the despair spiral. Or we can be a coach. How am I going to handle that better next time? What am I going to do in the future? What did I learn to prevent this from happening again? And if we're a coach instead of a critic, we shape our performance instead of shame it. We learn from mistakes instead of lose face. And my dad used to tell us, you can't motivate people to do better by making them feel bad. And when we're a coach instead of a critic, we motivate ourselves to do better and be better instead of making ourselves feel bad.
It's so amazing. I hope everyone here buys every single one of your book and reads it, because every single one has, I don't know, Sam, there's so much wisdom that I can't imagine you just woke up with one day, right? It was accumulation of all of these amazing events. Maybe the change in Florida when you used a different word, maybe, taking off for a year and really seeing the value in that balance. But you've gained so much wisdom and ability to use your voice to communicate, to help others use their voice to communicate. And I am so incredibly grateful for you, just for being here on the planet. Not to mention, you are such a giver that truly comes from your heart.
Thank you, Tricia. I think we're both very blessed to live Katharine Graham lives and careers. Katharine Graham was editor-in-chief of the Washington Post.
Mm-hmm.
And she was asked what it was like, and she thought about it. She gave the most wonderful answer. She said, to do what you love and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun? And that's what we get to do, isn't it?
It is. It's lovely. And that doesn't mean it doesn't come without challenges, which, I'm sure I could spend here all day interviewing you with all of the amazing stories that you have. But at the same time, I guess our time is coming to a close. But you had put something down when you wrote in that said it's never too late to put yourself in your own story. Mm-hmm. And when I think about books and I think about what movies are we interested in, what books do we want to read, they're all ones that are filled with adversity and challenge and struggle and growth and epiphany and love. They all weave in and out because they have to keep you hooked. I mean, if it was all about perfection, we'd be out in chapter 1. We'd be like, this is a very boring life.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing some of your struggles, some of the things that you've gone through and what you've learned to take you to where you are now. And I'm curious, where are you going?
Oh,
What's next?
I'm so excited. It is, I have a good friend, Judy Gray. She ran Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce and a veterinary association and Florida Society of American Execs, one of the best leaders I've ever met. And she's been telling me I should write a book about clarity for years. And I always had these other priorities and it become crystal clear to me, ha ha, that's what everyone wants from me is clarity, clarity about a standout, breakout book title, clarity about how to land a TEDx talk, clarity about what to do next, clarity about how they can, whatever. And so I'm offering these clarity weekends and I offer them here on my stream trail home in Austin, in Washington, D.C., Banff, Canada, Honolulu. And whether it's for personal or professional reasons, we help everyone get crystal clear why they are here and how they're going to make it happen this year.
I love that. Are you so excited?
Oh, I just see, we both love learning in community. We both love rising tide communities where everyone has a voice, where we learn from each other and we have an opportunity to be raw about what's not working and then get proactive what we're going to do about it. So to have a chance to do that with people I enjoy and respect in these beautiful natural surroundings on the water, in Banff, on the ocean, etc. Well, we're back to having the best of both worlds, aren't we?
I love it. Well, Sam, everyone can find you at samhorn.com, and you should definitely check her out. And Sam, as we part, I mean, you've given such amazing tips and clarity throughout this call, but I will open it up to you to tell everyone what you would like to tell them, because many people are struggling. Many people are afraid to share their voice, and you are the queen of teaching people to find their voice. So if you have any tips or final thoughts for people who are struggling with that, I would love to hear it.
Let's ask ourselves these words. 4 words, ready? What can I control?
Mm-hmm.
Tricia, in today's world, it's kind of topsy-turvy, upside down, inside out, right? And I have a good friend who is spiraling into despair because she feels she has a duty to stay informed. So she's like watching news and post, hours every day. And she's feeling so helpless. And helpless doesn't help anyone. It's a Nobel Peace Prize winner said, if you're feeling helpless, go help someone. And so if we are paying attention to events around us and we are spiraling into despair and feeling helpless and powerless, how we can feel helpful and powerful is what can we control? What can we impact? How can we change something for good? How can we be a little kinder? You and I just spent a spring break with our family and we're fully present, right, to the people we love. We're not taking it for granted. We're taking it for gratitude. We are seeing them as if for the first or last time. And I believe the way to mitigate a lot of what is going on in the world is for us to be present right here, right today. What can we impact for good and do that?
100% agree. Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking time today out of your busy schedule after a beautiful vacation and coming to chat with me. This has been incredibly valuable. I cannot wait to share it. And once again, I'm so grateful for you, Sam.
It works both ways. Thank you for the rising tide conversations you're having here with your show.
Absolutely.